Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to our member benefit webinar. In April, we unveiled our new membership structure catered to serve the holistic needs of our community. Our new structure includes self-select tiers, access to community connection and resources, a deepened investment in professional development, and extended free or discounted benefits offered by our partners. You can learn more about that in the chat. And so we're thrilled to have a fantastic lineup of member benefit partners as we embark on this exciting new chapter of the Guild. So whether you're a current member or considering joining, this is for you. Each week through June, we are highlighting one or two partners who will share valuable tools, resources, and insights on different topics. You can find our full lineup of member benefit partners on our website. And so now we're going to feature our member partner, Rob Fields from Mighty Mighty, and they will be talking us through some crisis planning for individuals and organizations. But I'll let Rob do his full introduction. So I'll pass it to you, Rob. Oh, you're muted.
There you go. You hear me now? Good. Okay. The technology. Thank you all for being here. Um, Quite an honor to speak to you guys today. I'm going to pull up my presentation and get into it because, yeah, it's, we should just get into it. So if you, oh, oh, PowerPoint, presenter view, and there we go. Lizette, are we looking good here? Awesome. Awesome. So, by way of introduction, as Lizette said, my name is Rob Fields. I'm going to share with you two sessions that um, I've been asked to think about and sort of formalize for Guild members. And it's one is going to be a session. The first one I'll cover is on crisis planning for arts organization, and a related topic, which is artist resilience, and how to think about moving forward through sort of personal, financial, professional crises as artists. So let's get started. First of all, I want to tell you a little bit about me. I am currently an art advisor and an art consultant. And before I was doing that, I led two New York City cultural institutions. I was the president, I was the director of the Sugar Hill Children's Museum in Harlem. And prior to that, and where I learned a lot about leading through crisis was as the president and executive director of Weeksville Heritage Center in Brooklyn. My background also includes time spent as an agency side marketer who worked at major agencies representing clients like IBM and Panasonic and Burger King. I also spent 10 years developing programs at a member organization, National Trade Association called the Association of National Advertisers. And as well, I spent time as an artist manager, music publicist, and the publisher of an online magazine. So I bring a lot of skills and perspectives to what I'm doing here. Um, as I mentioned, the first thing we're going to talk about is crisis planning for arts organizations. Um, this matters now because we're seeing a lot of disruption, obviously, in the arts sector. Things as diverse as public health, with COVID, lingering effects there, to most recently the funding shifts that have come as a result of federal funds being pulled away. Um, and the fact is, many organizations are underprepared for crises. And so many organizations, particularly smaller ones, have been just getting by. The reality is that arts organizations are eternally sort of under-resourced, most of them, and even for ones that are well-resourced, crises will crop up, and so crisis planning is really about being able to continue to do your mission, and it's about making sure that you are sustainable as an institution into the long term. What I'm going to talk about is sort of like a 3 hour intensive workshop that will give arts leaders practical tools to anticipate and navigate crises. And also, just again, the most important thing is the ability to safeguard your mission as a cultural or arts institution, and also maintain trust in the communities that where your institution's located, and also trust among the communities that you serve. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background. As I said earlier, my introduction to crisis management was my time at Weeksville. I was the president and executive director from 2017 to 2021. And at that time, during that time, Weeksville had its 50th anniversary in 2018, but we were very soon thereafter facing our third financial crisis in 6 years. And so we went from being a from almost closing to, if you look at Weeksville today, it is now a thriving organization. It wasn't uh, always guaranteed, and I'll just give you a real top line, that what I learned from that experience was the value of being embedded and engaged in your community. It's an absolute strength. Sometimes you will hear the term community organization or community rooted organization used as a pejorative, and I guarantee you it is not. It just means that you are connected to the communities where your organization is physically located, and to the people and the various audiences that you serve. And that's a great thing. When I got there, my mandate was to get visitor numbers up. And what served me well was being very clear that Weeksville was not MoMA or the Whitney. And that for me, going back to my time as an agency account guy, I knew I had to get up from behind my desk and get to know the community that we served, going to meet the churches and community groups and people at the New York City housing projects that were literally a stone's throw away from Weeksville, to be an ambassador for the organization, to be seen in the community. Also, as a marketer, I knew too that we needed, if your mandate is to get visitors up, a lot of that depended on having programming that was worth people's time. We have long been in an attention economy, so we really wanted to have programming that would make people stop and say, wow, I should really go to that. In marketing, we call those RTBs, reasons to believe, some of you may know. So, my goal was really to build a programming story that I could then take to funders to make a real case, strong case for support. And unfortunately, I ran out of runway. Grants and fundraising didn't happen as I had expected. And so there we were. I can tell you internal transparency was hard, particularly letting your staff know that we might not be able to handle your next paycheck. Um, External transparency and vulnerability was harder because I had to be honest and open with funders, elected officials, community members. But like I said, things did work out in our favor. The transparency was actually transformative, even if it was hard initially. That muscle gets stronger, and we were able to get some coverage in the New York Times. We had the support of the late actor Michael K. Williams, who many of you know from The Wire. He just kind of fell in love with the place, and became the face of our campaign. And because we were talking to funders, Ford came back with some general operating support. We were able to as a result of a crowdfunding campaign, hire a strategic planning firm that gave us a clear path forward, both programmatically, infrastructurally, and also from a business standpoint. And the final thing that helped us was there was a confluence of things, but we were able to get a line item in the New York City budget. And so that was sort of the cherry on top. That was not a bullet point on my turnaround plan, but it helped. It was just a real great sort of uh, into that campaign, and we actually luckily became part of the New York City Cultural Institution Group, which is now a group of 35 or 34 organizations that have a line item in the city budget, and we signed all that paperwork in February of 2020. So, talk about luck. And there are a lot of lessons to learn that I'll go into in the actual workshop. But just to give you an overview, I just wanted to kind of talk about that. Um, what do we mean by crisis? Crisis, I want to just define as a disruptive event or circumstance that prevents you from doing business as usual. It it overshadows any efforts that you may have to just continue running your programming and operations. Think of, a sudden leadership change or allegations of fraud or personal misconduct or, anything like that, or one of your staff, gets on social media and says something reckless. I mean, crisis, right? And the critical mindset, I think, so often we have to have is thinking about, okay, we have to admit there's a problem. You can't, sometimes you cannot expect things to just blow over, particularly if it's a financial issue. You have that, those things just don't blow over. And so action and communication are your friend, and communicating what actions you're taking to rectify the situation, taking responsibility for the situation, and saying, this is what we're learning from the situation and how we are going to make things better and make sure we don't do them again. And being able to communicate that smartly to all of your publics is absolutely critical. Who's this workshop going to be for? I can tell you it's not just for executive directors. Managing through a crisis, particularly the crisis that I am familiar with on a firsthand basis, it requires a full team effort, all hands on deck. That is, your staff, department heads, board, and community as well. And you're also, again, the people who have a vested interest in the organization, particularly when we think about Weeksville, it's your elected officials who fund you. It's, city council, it's your funders, things like that. So it is important to be able to partner with them and let them know what's going on, so that when you do come back, because the idea is you're going to get through this, is that you come back, no one's surprised, people have been in your corner. And I can tell you up front that that transparency is definitely appreciated on the part of funders. The workshop is going to work through a series of case studies. I'm thinking about various scenarios that will allow attendees to test themselves. Like, here's a situation. Let's see how you handle it. And then we'll come back to, well, here's what they did. And it'll either, I have a few already where it didn't work out for the organization, or it was handled poorly, and some that were handled well. We'll see what the variance is. And along the way, I want to arm you with some key tools, a custom crisis response plan, these communication templates and checklists, protocols for activating what's going to be your crisis team, ways to think about maintaining donor and stakeholder confidence, and ways to emerge stronger on the other side of it. The custom crisis response plan is going to help you think about, based on your organization's needs, size, and mission, identifying potential risk, and maps out how to respond effectively, and also get you thinking about how do I align staff, leadership, and board on a shared course of action. The communication templates and checklists are going to be something that'll be ready for you to use to save time and reduce your errors under pressure. Help you ensure consistency of tone, content, and clarity across the many audiences that you're going to need to communicate with. And they include internal teams and audiences, media, and community, uh, so that you can talk very clearly to them and communicate clearly to them. How do you activate your crisis team? First, you want to define who does what and when and how in those critical early moments. Help you think about where you need to delegate decision making authority. What are notification trees, clarity of roles, and this is something that I think is going to help you reduce confusion and accelerate your organization's response. We're going to walk through all of these. um, Maintaining donor and stakeholder confidence. I can tell you from experience that as difficult a conversation it is to have with the funder, oh, we're in trouble, because their response is going to be, but we just gave you money. Never, the money's never enough. We all know. But what they appreciate is being apprised of a situation before it gets out generally. So well before the press release goes out that we are struggling, I talked to all of our funders and they were like, not great news, but I'm glad you told me about this early. And that goes a long way because they're not caught blindsided. And this is absolutely critical because you want to maintain your funders. Again, the assumption is you're going to be coming back from this. You're going to be smarter, stronger, more resilient after this because the organization as a whole, not just the executive director, but the organization as a whole, from staff to board, is going to be smarter and do things differently to ensure the situation doesn't happen again. And so you're going to need your funders and you want them right there with you. And again, the recovery strategies, this will include action steps to restore operations, reputation, and morale. As you go through a challenging situation, I'm sure you all know staff morale can drop because they don't know what's going on. The jobs they've had may change. You may have had to cut hours. I know at Weeksville we cut hours. I took a salary cut of 50%. We all bore the brunt, but part of that was so that we could keep everyone, right? So we just reduced days for the staff. I took a pay cut and we figured out a way to make it through. And again, you need your team because no one can do this on their own. So, lesson learned frameworks to help you think about future preparedness and and thinking about this challenge as an opportunity to reframe your organization's vision and resilient story. How does your story change as a result of what you've gone through and what you've learned? And so we'll talk about that as well. Um, yeah, and we'll have some examples. I want to, as I said, we want to explore, give you a chance to come up with real-time responses to things like maybe a funding cut or a leadership scandal or a natural disaster impact on venue. I mean, if you think about the wildfires in California or the flooding, those were real sort of situations. Thinking about how you develop and share your plans in session, there will be an opportunity for you all to hear how your fellow attendees are thinking about things and by the ways that they come up with ideas to handle these scenarios. And again, you're going to leave with a bunch of templates. Also, I think as I'm a consultant, certainly happy to provide 30-day post workshop consulting for you if you have questions or if you're thinking about some issues that you're seeing on the horizon. That's sort of included in the cost of this workshop. And again, you're getting the digital resource toolkit and the reusable crisis plan templates. Um, the team at the National Guild asked me to think, oh, I didn't change this, sorry. These sessions are going to start in July, not June. Sorry about that. July, not June. And we're going to limit them so we can have more focused time. We're asking members, organizations to pay $550 for this session. Non-members have a higher $695 fee. Each additional participant, there's a fee for that. And so that's how we're thinking about, sort of taking, you know, it's my experience managing through a crisis and providing some frameworks for you all to maybe future proof your organizations. And if you are anticipating some challenges, to give you ways to put the structures in place internally so that you can effectively deal with them. And also just know that it's not just you. It's every crisis feels like you're going through it alone, and lots of other organizations have been or will go through them because it is the nature of uh, working and leading arts and cultural institutions. It just is. There's never enough money. There's never enough resources and whatnot. So there will be some kind of challenge throughout your time there. So that's the first seminar. I think I can stop here and take some questions before we move on to the artist resilience session. Or Lizette, should I just continue going, or what would you suggest?
I'd suggest we continue going.
Great, 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 great. And for the artist out here, come on, there we go. Um, Similar sort of thinking, like, look, I am not an artist, but I have dealt with artists throughout my career. As I mentioned, I was an artist manager in the music industry. I'm an arts advisor. I've developed relationships with a lot of artists across creative disciplines, be it music, literature, fine art, theater. So I feel like I have a sense of artists and just knowing them and just knowing their struggles. And so I put together a separate artist workshop that's really about how do you sustain your practice through uncertainty. Um, and we are, as was the case for cultural institutions, very unpredictable environments. We are gladly and gratefully through the pandemic, but now we've got economic shocks, broadly speaking. Health, personal health is an issue and can crop up. And, many artists do lack infrastructure. They're kind of out there making it on their own, just cobbling, an existence together, particularly in super expensive cities like New York or Los Angeles, Chicago. And the ways of thinking about resilience means how do you maintain your vision for your life and also continue your practice and continue to evolve in that. And so we know about, why we're doing this now. This is growing volatility in the cultural creative sectors. And the fact is, again, so many artists often things are going well and but they have no real long-term planning in place. And so resilience, as was the case for organizations, really does equate to long-term sustainability for practices. Um, I'm going to look at in this session, going to look at these different types of crisis scenarios. In terms of potentially personal crises are potentially things like health emergencies. Sudden illness or injury before a major deadline. Uh, Mental health breakdown. Joseph was talking about stress and anxiety and burnout and depression affecting an artist's ability to work, or a family care crisis, needing to take care of like a sick loved one, or deal with unexpected parental demands. All that is really real and can impact your ability to, you know, do your art. There are professional crises that artists potentially deal with. Lost funding, a grant falls through, which we're seeing somewhere. A gig or a commission is canceled. Performance, exhibition, freelance contract gets pulled at the last minute. Intellectual property theft is real. Someone reproduces or profits from your work without your permission, or there is potential for public backlash or misinterpretation. Maybe there's some online controversy or criticism related to an artist's work or statements. In the financial area, related are things like sudden income loss. Major income source dries up. You lose your studio eviction, you're priced out, or losing access to a workspace. Tax or legal trouble, mismanaged taxes, like you didn't put enough aside, or you get to the end of the year and you find out you don't have enough expenses to offset your income, and so now you've got a tax bill or something. So that's really real. Environmental or structural crises can impact artists. Natural disasters, we mentioned the California fires or flooding in some areas. Tech breakdowns, you can lose your digital files or assets or tools. Computer crashes, your website gets hacked. And we are all very much aware, for international artists, policy or visa changes, immigration or residency status issues can certainly impact you. And then lastly, this whole level of community level crises, closure of key cultural spaces, local galleries or venues or residencies shut down. And so people who had plans to come, they can't. You could, lose representation. If you're a fine artist, you lose your gallery. It either closes or you get dropped. Um, Social unrest is real. There's a crisis in the community, where you live or work and you can't get to your studio. So these are many scenarios that interrupt. Again, a crisis is an interruption of your ability to carry on as usual, right? Just like it was for organizations, but it can happen to artists. Um, and again, elder care situations. Like as I said to you, I'm not an artist, but I have definitely found myself taking care of my elderly mother. And many of us are aware that those situations are fine until they're not. Your parents are doing fine, or so you think, until their doctor pulls you aside and says, your mom can't live on her own anymore, but you have an opening in 2 weeks, and oh my God, you're thrust into this role of primary caregiver. So that is real. The financial crises, the environmental crises, we talked about, and same with financial crises. Maybe your work's not selling like it used to, and you've dipped into savings to cover studio cost and materials, but that cushion is drying up. What do you do? So how do you manage through these situations? And so in this, I believe in tools, for for as they come out of this session. So I want to give you tools and resources to navigate these scenarios. So the crisis response protocol are guides for artists to work through immediate steps during a personal professional emergency. And it will cover things like communication, creative continuity, and short-term triage, like what do you need to do right now? And helping you minimize the disruption to both your life and your practice during critical moments. Um, Thinking about financial resilience is, offering ways to diversify your income streams and reduce your vulnerability, not having all your eggs in one basket. We're going to talk about budgeting, particularly for folks whose money comes irregularly. Artists are, unless you have a teaching job somewhere, your money comes intermittently. You don't get paid every 2 weeks. And so how do you sort of plan for that? How do you build emergency reserves? Um, Also thinking about things like sliding scale pricing, passive income, fiscal sponsorships, that can be helpful for you. Um, Professional contingency plans are really around helping artists prepare for postponed gigs or shows, health setbacks, or other lost opportunity. And it'll include things like including templates for postponement notices, contracts that have cancellation clauses, and really is going to encourage you to set up a backup plan for key projects or revenue events. The emergency resource directory, I'm putting together a curated list of grants, legal aid, health services, mutual aid networks that can help you, and it'll be categorized by, financial, legal, mental health, housing, etc. And the purpose of that is to have them nearby so that you won't have to do this research under stress. Also want to think about protecting your assets. How are your physical and digital uh, artwork safe and secure? Want to have a conversation with you about copyright, insurance, data backup best practices, and think about helping to protect your legacy and ongoing access to your creative materials and your work. And the last thing, is kind of back to this idea about community and, really making sure you're thinking about building a supportive network. None of us are out here alone, and the example that I spoke of earlier from Weeksville was all about being engaged in a community, and this is true for individuals as well. Like, who can you call when the stuff hits the fan for you, and oh my God, what are you going to do? So we want to focus on reciprocity and strategic collaborations and mentorship, and you know maybe give you a tool to map your network and set outreach goals if you are lacking in any of these areas. And so the whole idea is for you to emerge from this with a roster of tools that you can use. Um, I'm estimating this will be about a 3 hour workshop. We'll keep it small, maybe 15 folks. The pricing, what you see here is member, non-member, for individuals, and also for artist collectives, because I know those are a big part of the National Guild's membership as well. So want to make this affordable for a group to attend. Um, and yeah, we'll get those started in July. I'm going to work with Precious and Lizette on dates, which they will let you know about. But I am here as a resource. And so I do want to open things up for discussion at this point and see if there are any questions that I can answer.